What's up, everybody? Coach Rob here, and I thought today we might have some fun, something a little bit more less serious. When you're talking about diet and training and fitness, and everybody gets all emotional over this stuff. It's like they treat everything that I say or anybody out there in the fitness space as what they're saying is some kind of a personal attack, or they live in an echo chamber and they just tune into people that 100% agree with them, or they're looking to latch onto somebody that they can unite with to push their cause. And sometimes it just gets tedious and annoying. And I've been pushing back on the zealot-like, cult-like training and nutrition movement for a very long time. And if I'm being honest, I was even kind of mired in that for a while. And I've admitted to that, and I've taken full responsibility, because if you're not able to pivot on a viewpoint or an ideology, especially if you've really lived it, and even beyond that, if you've coached it with thousands of people as I have, one of the best things that you can do is continue to experiment, continue to work through details. And that's, for these super science-based people, which it isn't always about science, because science in itself can be very flawed. And anything that has to do with or pertaining to scientific data should always include an asterisk next to it that says until further notice. So I thought, rather than keeping to beat this dead horse about certain topics that many people are so emotional about, why don't we have a little bit of fun? And I thought we'd begin by looking at a few not so positive comments that I've received on some of my videos. Hey, if you can't laugh at yourself and have a little bit of fun with this self, then you're just going to be stressed out all the time. And it was even Joe Rogan that said, I don't read the comments. Well, that's great, Joe. If you got a bazillion, followers and subscribers and you're worth a couple $100 million, but me, I'm not so much. And so I do have an interest in what people think about the content that I produce and the things that I say. And there are times where people make a comment and I'm like, I hadn't really looked at it from that angle. I'll do better. And I may even have a slight shift of opinion, or it may cause me to go down an avenue or down a rabbit hole that I previously hadn't even thought about. And then I'll do that. And then I'll report the findings back to you wonderful people right here on my fine YouTube channel. But every once in a while, you'll get some of those comments where you just got to sit back and chuckle. And again, I've got enough stress in my life. And when I get stressed out, well, then by golly, I escape the stress by usually taking a long motorcycle ride. Spending time with my family. Me and my family, it's like living in a bunker. I'm not a very outgoing guy. I don't party. I don't socialize much. I spend a lot of time at home, and that's my happy place. Or I'll sit in the backyard and watch my chickens and my ducks. They're hilarious, by the way, but I digress. So I thought we'd take a look at some fun comments that I've received recently here on the channel. And some of them make a point to a degree, but some of them honestly are still mired in a very dogmatic thinking. And you can tell that some of these people have been deep in these trenches for a long time, and they're not very close to budging, or they just like sitting behind keyboards because they have nothing better to do and pick fights with people like me. And I'm just not taking the bait. Well, not beyond the extent of talking about some of these comments today and giving you some of my actual thought and insight to some of them. And anyway, here it goes. So here's the first one. This one was fantastic to kick it off. Another carb junkie wanting us to wreck our health. Yawn. Well, Mr. Singing Trad Songs, I don't have anything against traditional songs. I'm quite a fan. I'm a musician myself. I'm not a carb junkie, not by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, if you were to tell me that I'm being sentenced to live the remainder of my days on a deserted island and I can only choose one food for the rest of my life, it probably would be the aforementioned steak. Not sure it would be a ribeye. That'd be a tough call. But at any rate, I'm not a carb junkie. However, I do like a diet that gives me some variety because there are carbs that I do enjoy, and for a variety of reasons. Well, number one, from the performance aspect of carbohydrate, and I've talked about this very often on this channel, especially over the last year, all through my last contest prep where I went with carb cycling over a hybrid carnivore approach and did far better. And lo and behold, believe it or not, didn't die, didn't incur or any severe systemic inflammation at all. In fact, I would say it was zero. It made the contest prep diet a bit more sustainable for me. And it was nice to have the added variety of those foods. And my performance, I would say, had an uptick for sure. My performance in the gym stayed very consistent throughout the entire prep, even deep into the prep where I was practically starving to death, trying to get down to that ridiculously low level of body fat that unless you're competing, you really should have no desire to get there because it's absolutely not necessary. And to suggest that I am some kind of a carb junkie because I've included carbohydrate back into my diet, and this is the important part, carbohydrates that human beings have been subsisting on since the dawn of humanity. Throughout the entirety of that human existence, we have been eating carbohydrate, and not to our peril. If you go back hundreds of years, thousands of years, or tens of thousands of years, or millions of years, if that's your thing, you're not going to find a broken, destroyed, metabolically fractured segment of the population as we do now. You're not going to find overwhelming heart disease, diabetes, metabolic distress, cancers, all of these things that we're seeing in massive amounts, terrifying amounts now, especially as we age, the over 40, over 50, 60 and beyond crowd. You'd go back in time and you would see many, many people hunting and gathering. Well, that's where the term came from, which meant how human beings have eaten and consumed food throughout pretty much the course of our human existence up until the Neolithic period when we started to produce, manufacture, and take in copious amounts of shit, processed foods, seed oils, copious amounts of refined sugar, and the like. Before that, we ate a lot of carbs. And certain cultures, depending on the geography and the demographic, ate quite a bit of carbohydrates. Some in the 60 to 65% range of their intake came from certain carbohydrates like rice and corn, vegetable matter and fruit and so forth. And in other regions, it was far, far less carbohydrate, especially in colder climates. But there really hasn't been a society, culture, tribe, or culture that has been zero carb for an extended period of time. That is kind of a new thing. That is the new, strict carnivore diet. And I'm not saying that's bad because we've destroyed ourselves so badly with the advent of modern processed foods and industrial foods that perhaps it takes an intervention like a very strict, almost zero carb carnivore or ketogenic diet to reverse the damage that many of these people have incurred by consuming these horrific foods over a long period of time. So at no point am I shitting on the carnivore diet. I just understand that if you do your due diligence, you'll understand that carbohydrate is not on this earth like some poison plant, that if you consume it, it's a slow drip of certain death. That's just absolutely not the case. And you're going to get people that say, well, when I eat carbs, I feel like shit. Okay, well, that's you, but that's certainly not everyone. And they treat it like the carbohydrate including humans, are some subset of society, all of which are marching towards imminent death. And that's not even remotely the case. Oftentimes, the people who have severe impact to their health and performance because of the intake of carbohydrate or sugar, and they're leaving out the industrial seed oils, which is probably taking up the bulk of the damage, it's because they have abused themselves for so long that now they've become extremely sensitive to carbohydrate. And then there's the psychological or emotional side to carbohydrate intake. But I think even beyond that, it becomes more of a hyper-palatable thing. And we're going to talk about that in a second from one of the other comments. Hold on, my phone timed out. So to suggest that I'm just a carb junkie wanting to wreck your health, if you've watched 2 or 3 of my videos, and if you haven't, check some out. My recent ones are very short, and I'm trying to keep them that way. You'll realize very quickly, if you're honest with yourself, that my goal is to absolutely positively not wreck anyone's health. In fact, it's the exact 180 opposite. I'm trying to rescue you from certain dogmatic trends, certain training trends, things of that nature. One of the biggest things is how we just don't take ourselves seriously as human beings and love ourselves enough to get up and work hard to repair damage of a sedentary lifestyle that has a shitty diet stacked on top of that. It's sort of a mutual thing, synergistically, that has marched you towards digging your grave with your teeth and your inactivity. So I absolutely reject that I am any kind of a carb junkie. When I have a small serving of rice with my steak or my chicken or fish or whatever, I'm not constantly calling the server over or going back to the kitchen if we're eating at home and continuing to load my plate up with rice. I have a serving of it. I'm very satiated. And then I go about my business. But it's when you combine fats and carbs together to create the hyper palatable shitstorm of foods, mostly processed and ultra processed foods. These are the foods that make you always want to go back for more. That's why you have 4 donuts instead of 1. This is why you have 137 chips instead of 1, on and on and on. That's why when you pass by the peanut M&Ms, you'll have 2 or 3. And when you pass by the jar again, you might have another 4 or 5 until the damn jar is empty. So once again, you may find my videos a yawn, as you say, but to suggest that I'm a carb junkie is grossly inaccurate. In fact, it's laughable. And thinking that I have any desire whatsoever to wreck your health is also just as ludicrous and laughable. Dude, go do something. You're sitting behind screens too much. You're buying into too much of the bullshit that's coming from that small segment of the low carb community, the grifters out there that are using fear-mongering tactics and shaky science at best to convince you that we all need to be killing an antelope in our spare time, and that's the only damn thing we should be eating. We did that back in the day for nothing more than survival, to stay alive. And if we had a shitty hunt that day, then we were relegated to eating what we could gather, scavenge, forage, or whatever. And we did a lot of that. So again, not an accurate assumption. I got to turn this one sideways because it's a little long. WTF? What the are you talking about except for clicks? Oh, you know me. It's all about the clicks, dude. Going viral. That's all I care about. Real carnivores aren't adding carbs. Maybe a cheat meal once in a while, which I do sometimes. No problem with that, he says. I believe it's a he. Could be wrong, or she. If you're not a real carnivore, stop pretending that your BS will stop coming across my feed. Perhaps I'm not a real carnivore to the extent that in the last, say, decade. Now, I know there are some out there who have been eating strict zero carb carnivore for a long time. There's that cattle rancher chick that pops up all the time. They always point to her because she's there. But there aren't many out there, regardless of what you hear or think, who have been eating zero carbohydrate for 20, 30, 40, 50 years or beyond. They've stumbled onto the carnivore diet because of its religious fervor within the community and its promise to end all of your health ills. It will pay your taxes. It will fix the leaky faucet in your house. It will do practically everything. It will repair every relationship. Your wife will love you again. This is what's out there. But again, most of it is just fear mongering because these are the people that want the clicks. They stick to one very dogmatic, very narrow view and sell it as the one thing that's going to save you from all the things that are wrong in your life, both physically, mentally, physiologically, all of the things. I'm sorry if I'm clogging up your feed with my carb bullshit, but again, it's not about carbs. It's about not having a narrow, dogmatic, singular view of what diet can be. And I think it's rather silly, if I'm being honest, that there are so many people out there, and I think that window is closing, that thinks if you eat any carbohydrate or anything outside of zero carb carnivore, it's a tick-tock, slow death sentence. It's just ridiculous because it's not. There are millions of people, high performing, healthy, with impeccable blood work, who live long lives, who are ingesting some carbohydrate, if not a lot of carbohydrate. Now, I did have, before I go into my next comment that I have evidence of in a screenshot, I did have another comment, speaking of all this, that came across that the individual must have deleted because it was there and then it wasn't. He started talking about the notion that, hey, you want to know the reason, or have you ever thought about the reason why so many bodybuilders drop dead at a younger age? It's because of the carbs, man. No there, young camper, it is not the carbs unless they are ingesting such outrageous amounts of it well beyond their competitive years as they've aged, which most are not. You want to know what's killing top level famous bodybuilders? The ones that are standing on Olympia stages, that have massive, million follower guys and gals. Spoiler alert, it's an over excessive amount of performance enhancing drugs. Now, yes, some bodybuilders today are leading very vibrant, healthy lives in their 50s and 60s and even 70s. You could look at Lee Labrada or Dorian Yates, but you can also, or Jay Cutler even for that matter, but you could also look at these individuals and watch their social media and watch their interviews and see that when they got outside of bodybuilding, they dropped all of the crazy drug protocols. Most of the men are now just on standard TRT protocols, which is nothing wrong with that whatsoever. It's just bringing you into safe, normal hormonal levels and not exceeding into the super physiological. And they've started doing more cardio. They're not, training like they used to. They're not eating 10,000 calories in the off season and 4,000 calories in 5, 6 meals, 7 meals a day when they were competing, which at that level is what is generally necessary to achieve and sustain that kind of physique. So yeah, when you hear about the ones that are dropping dead, it's because of the bodybuilding lifestyle that they didn't want to get rid of, or they went so freaking hard in the paint when they were competing, taking so many ridiculous drug protocols. I mean, there are guys out there, taking a gram of trenbolone and all of these different, anabolic drugs. And then they get into the very dangerous cutting agents like Winstrol and clenbuterol. They're taking diuretics, which oftentimes, like especially back in the 90s, a lot of the bodybuilding deaths came because of massive amounts of diuretic use, which can be extremely dangerous. And even in my competitive years and the people that choose to work with me who are taking some performance enhancing drugs, that's their call. It's completely on them. I never, ever recommend a diuretic. So that's why they're dropping dead. But he erased that comment. So maybe he came to his senses and thought differently. Another says, what the hell are you on about the mass exodus from the carnivore community? Can you point to more than a handful of influencers that's added carbs back in? People thinking you need carbs to train hard or perform in the gym don't know what they are talking about. Yeah, well, if you took 10,000 top-level competitive bodybuilders, both natural or enhanced, I think it's safe to assume or safe to guess that 98% of them are utilizing some carbohydrates. And not only that, people who are not competitive bodybuilders or serious athletes, who are just healthy, fit people who live a fairly active lifestyle, are eating some carbohydrates, monitoring the intake, not eating shitty hyperpalatable foods, not eating a bunch of processed garbage, not going to fast food restaurants every day, not having DoorDash deliver all of their meals to them. And they're living very, very healthy lives. I work with people. I see the blood work. I see my blood work. There are many people out there who are consuming some amount of carbohydrates, and they're outrageously fit, outrageously healthy, and perform extremely well. Now, whether you want to use carbohydrate to fuel your performance and fill muscle glycogen to have energy for high-intensity muscular contractions, or if you would prefer to try to do that more with fat, that's your call. And if you're not using carbohydrate and you're a hard training athlete and you're doing great with that, then here's the part you'll want to remember. Keep doing that. I'm not telling anybody to stop. But once again, here's another narrow dogmatic view that somebody has pulled out of the very narrow-minded community, and they've been brainwashed into thinking that anybody that's using carbohydrate for performance, anybody that's using carbohydrate for their training, whether it be pre and post workout or carb cycling throughout the day, that it's just slow death and they're on their way to their ultimate mortal demise. And that's just not the case. With anything, you can abuse it. If you take in too much dietary fat, guess what? You're going to get fat. If you take in way too much dietary carbohydrate, more than you can fill glycogen stores in your body and use for immediate expendable energy, then yeah, you can have detrimental side effects from that too. But generally, the people that are getting that pre-diabetes diagnosis when they just turned 37 or 35 or 43, it's not because they had a half a cup of jasmine rice with their tenderloin. It's because they're eating fast food, processed food, shit. You know, all the things I keep saying. I keep saying this over and over again until I'm blue in the face. It's not going to make it any less true. We have to be logical, rational, thinking human beings here. Again, human beings have been using some degree or some level of intake of carbohydrates since the dawn of human existence. It didn't shit the bed until about the 1950s. To suggest that you can't have a little carbohydrate, and I'm just saying this stuff for clicks, brother, you have no idea. I went through a period where it was frigid up in here on my YouTube channel, and I was getting attacked more than I was getting complimented. And then the tide turned because people started to look into this. And there are, yes, I'm not saying that the entire scope of the carnivore community in terms of the influencers are all jumping ship, but there's some big names coming out of people who are either went completely away from the carnivore lifestyle or they've selectively added back some carbohydrates and they're admitting that they're doing just fine. Some are having a little of this, didn't like it. Some are having a little of that, doing fine. Some abandoning it altogether and choosing a more carb cycling approach, and they're doing great and they're thriving and they're doing awesome. So who cares? But it is a thing right now. There are the big dog carnivore influencers out there who are actually making videos on this right now. Pay attention. So among the big dog carnivore influencers, there has been a pretty significant exodus from the community, or at the very minimum, they're changing the scope of it and converting more to a slightly hybrid version, or like I've been saying forever, they're going from a strict no-carb carnivore diet to more of a hybrid hyper-carnivore diet. You know, the term that's actually in university literature. So they're not to be shamed or faulted for that. We should say, hey man, cool. If that works for you and you enjoy that more and it's more sustainable for you and you're getting some benefit from it, either in how you feel or the variety of it, or in many cases it's through performance, then keep rocking that. Let's stop tearing people down and start lifting people up. I said this many, many videos ago. If the carnivore community, the keto community, the carb cycling community, all of these communities are focused on improving themselves through better choices in diet and through greater levels of output through activity and strength training and cardiovascular training and metabolic training or whatever the case may be. We should unite as a big united front, even though we have minor differences in the way we choose to put food into our faces. The outcome for most of us is very good, so we should be collectively coming together and not bickering among ourselves and helping the real victims out there, the people who are completely metabolically broken, who don't want to get up and work out, who don't want to get up and take a nice walk outside, who are stuck behind screens all day, feeding their faces with Monster energy drinks and DoorDash, and completely broken and falling apart. These are the people we need to lift up. We need to be more positive as a unified front. So again, and I don't want to go too long here. I've been trying to keep these videos shorter, but you know, it's funny to me because I have to laugh when I'm trying to put out well-meaning content to show people who are confused, who are getting all of this massive amounts of conflicting information. You know, if you were to watch 25 different nutritional videos from 25 different, ideology-based channels, you would come to the conclusion that, oh shit, I can't have anything. I can't eat a damn thing. Everything is going to kill me. The carnivores say plants are going to kill you. Carbohydrates are going to kill you. The vegans say that protein and meat is going to kill you. You know, you got the animal-based people who just eat fruit and tell you that the plants and the rice are going to kill you. No matter what you do, you get some of these cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs influencers in the primal space that tell you that eating half of an apple is some kind of a death sentence, which is absolutely ludicrous at minimum. So you have to use some logical, rational thought, to use two words that I use all the time, and find the path that works best for you. But if you want to simplify this greatly, just use single ingredient healthy whole foods. Prioritize protein first, and then choose your energy component, whether it be carbohydrate or fat. Consume whichever energy component that you prefer, not in excess over what your energy output is. Otherwise, either fat or carbohydrate can both store. And if you're going for a higher carbohydrate energy system-based metabolism, then consume a little less fat. If you're going for more of a fat-based energy metabolism, consume less carbs. You don't want to have the competing high levels of both fat and carbs in the body simultaneously. This is a bad thing. So if you look at it that way, and then you say, no more fast food, restaurant food is on occasion only, every once in a while, and if I do go to a restaurant, choose someplace where a human being is serving your food, and you could order like a nice steak and a baked sweet potato or something like that, or go to an Asian place and have a sushi night, or maybe some chicken and rice or whatever. Train, move your body, be active, get outside, go walk, go bike, go run around and be stupid, get out and play, chase your children or grandchildren, take the dog for a walk, lift some weights for God's sake, build your body. Stop being a soft, mushy, Jabba the Hutt piece of shit and accepting the fact that it's just the way I am, or I'm just getting older and it's destined to be this way. That defeatist thinking is absolute garbage, and it's been programmed into your brain by big food, big pharma, big government, and people in your inner circle who have accepted that. And they want to bring you down to their level to justify their own personal laziness because it's a little safe place for them and they feel more comfortable about being a slow, fat sack of shit. If one person takes my information and makes a positive change for the good, and they get a very healthy, positive outcome for that, and it changes their life to a point where there's a shift in their thinking, there's a shift in the way they move their body, there's a shift in the way they consume food, and they get a positive change from that, then I have already won. So before I get back to training clients, maybe I'll go take that motorcycle ride. Woosah. That's some good therapy right there. Any riders out there, let me know in the comments, or leave a comment and just say something nice, or say something shitty, and I may highlight you in the next comment video. But until then, I'm out.